There seemed to be some kind of problem with ma'am's headphones, so she'll be joining with her mobile phone. So please give her a few minutes, ma'am, sir.
A very good evening to one and all.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Jeevan sir.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Verma ji.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Kirti ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening to you and Chandan.
मैडम प्रणाम प्रणाम मैडम
Vishwa Chandan. Indrani ma'am, we may start. Just check it out with her, then ask Himanshu to continue.
Ma'am has already called me. She told me that she'll be joining in a second.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, Nivansha, am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, shall we start?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, please do.
Yeah, ma'am. So, a very good evening to all. I am Punitrida Singh, this is Sakshi Science College, Rajnandgaon. And first, I would like to wish you all a very happy and Trithya. Akshay Trithya means unending or eternity. Same goes with language. And learning language is a beautiful unending journey. And I thank our CD Forum has answered easy ma'am for this form absolute and to end. But today we have two wonderful Indians, Mr. Sadharman and our teacher and Mr. G. Sir as our chairperson. Both are assistant professor from HNLU Raipur. Very welcome, sir. I heartily welcome both of you, sir. I will also like to extend my welcome to all the dignitaries, research scholars, and students, PG students, UG students for attending today's STEM session. The topic of today's discussion is understanding language aspects and perspective. Today, we also have Ms. Mimansa Razoria, coordinator of the session. She is currently pursuing her master's degree from Digvijay College, Rajnandgaon. She is also a budding poet and she has published her poems in anthology. Mimansha is also a certified and five-level Japanese speaker. She is also the vice president of English Literature of Institute. So, with all good wishes, I will become Mimansha. Over to you, Mimansha, for the presence.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the introduction. It is really a privilege of mine to be today's coordinator. For that, I would like to thank iSpell, my mentors, my professor, and my gurus. Before going further towards the topic of today's session, I would like to dedicate a shlok to Ma Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom and intellect. सरस्वती नमस्तभ्यं वरदे वरदे कामरूपिणी विद्यारंभम करिष्यामि सिद्धि भवतु मे सदा. Ode to goddess to tremendously enhance focus power and retention capacity of the mind. Now, I would like to tell you about today's topic, which is understanding language, aspect, and perspective. And for that, I would like to introduce today's chief speaker, Mr. Burman, sir. He is an assistant professor at Hidyatul National Law University, Raipur. He has done his graduation in BA English and post-graduation in MA from Guru Ghasidas Vishwavidyalaya, Bilaspur. Sir has qualified NET and JRF. Sir is also associate at Aziz Premji Foundation, Dhamtari, and guest faculty at Ravi Shankar Shukla University, Raipur. Sir has presented papers at various national and international conferences. He has delivered various lectures at many colleges, schools, universities, including NIT. Now, I would like Sir to please come and please deliver today's lecture.
Uh, Thank you, Mimansha, and respected Kirti ma'am, Harpreet ma'am, and all the other dignitaries present here. My colleague, a mentor in a way, Jeevan Sagar sir. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And in fact, I was looking forward to this. And before I start, I would like to make a disclaimer, and the disclaimer is this: that I'm afraid I'm not going to tell something new. So, and as far as my way of or style of talking and discussing things are concerned, so maybe at one point of time you may say that, oh my God, he looks kind of boring. So I will try my best to avoid that. And with that, I'll come to the topic that I chose for the day. For that, I would be sharing my PPT if that is all right. Mimansha, can I do that?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. So now that I asked a question answered by Mimamsa, that means it settles that I'm quite audible and visible, maybe, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So okay. Okay, so is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Great. So just hang on. There I go. Okay, so the topic that I chose to talk about for the day was understanding language, aspects, and perspectives. So, to start this session, I have a couple of propositions, and those propositions are First, language is essential for a society in particular and to mankind in general. Second, every language is equal as far as the way we look at a language is concerned. And now think about this world and everywhere, in fact, and the numbers of languages that we have. And it was quite interesting that one among us is and also can speak Japanese. So that is again another, let's say, beautiful aspect of language. And it should be and it shall be a matter of celebration. So, with that, I would continue with my presentation. And for that, I have a quote from Noam Chomsky, Language and Mind. That's the book, where he says that when we study human language, we are approaching what some might call the human essence, the distinctive qualities of mind that are, so far as we know, unique to man. Now, I want you to focus on this part where it says unique to man. I'm not going to elaborate much on this part as of now because the things that we'll be discussing will cover this part. So, the focus point here is the language is also associated with what we call human essence, that is unique to man. Right? So, moving on, few questions. One of those is this: how much time do we spend thinking about the language that we speak? Not much. And fortunately or unfortunately, if you are a language teacher, then this is something that you will focus more, or you will talk about it. Otherwise, we don't talk about languages, right? So, and also there was one thing that I wanted to ask, like, think about this when okay, think about this again, a bit ironical expression on my part. I'm asking you to think without using any language. Can you do that? Can we do that? Can we think without using a language, or any language for that matter?
No, sir, we cannot.
Right?
No, it's not possible.
Is not even possible. In fact, the time I'm speaking, you might be thinking that, again another boring teacher or that kind of thing. For that, you need a language. It could be any language, right? And then the next question that I have is about which language is better, your mother tongue or the other language. So
Mother tongue.
see, that was a trick question. The proposition that I made was simply this: that every language is equal. So when I say it's like my mother is better than your mother, so it is not a good expression. In fact, there is no comparison. A mother is a mother. The same thing we can say about the language. A language is a language. There is no question of which one is better, which one is not. However, for our convenience sake, for our political aspirations, and then other things, right? We often say this language is bad, this language is good, and etc. etc. But as the thing is that a mother is a mother, the same way a language is a language. So, and also sometimes there was an observation made by somebody who commented that we call ourselves Homo sapiens. That is, uh, people who can think, or human that has the capacity of thinking. But I would say, if I am to call the mankind homo loquens, that is, with the ability to speak, I won't be wrong. And I will elaborate on that part. And now I have an example for in some African communities. There, when a new baby is born, they call it Puntu. That means it hasn't got the language. A child who is not able to speak is Kuntu. The moment that toddler starts learning language or speaking a language or in language, right, then it becomes a Muntu, that is a person. So how wonderful that is, right? And I'm not I am just giving you an example of a community in some African community, and that has some meaning. That has got some meaning in it. And I'm not, let's say, propaganding this, but I'm simply looking at one example. Now, if I go ahead, when I say I know a language, what are the things that I know when I say I know a language, right? So, first thing first, I would call it I have some level of linguistic knowledge. Linguistic knowledge in the sense that when I know a language, I can speak, and also somebody or some people will understand what I'm saying. Also, I have the capacity to produce sounds, and those sounds would have certain meanings, right? And then those sounds could be interpreted and understood by others. So that is first thing first, linguistic knowledge. Then the next part is knowledge of sound system. So the sounds any language system has. For example, you can see that there are certain sounds that are not in Hindi language, if you know what I mean, right? For example, when I say dhanus, dha, we don't have that in English. And then there are plenty of examples, and I'm not going into that. Then you have the knowledge of words, right? And how those words are made, the combination and everything, you know that. And then from words you can you make a sentence, and then sentences, then paragraphs, then you can write a book on that, right? So just to look at what do we understand by language. So I have got a few of representative definitions of language. Okay, for example, Aristotle says that it is or speech is the representation of the experience of the mind. Okay, too vague and too philosophical, and but still uh, acceptable in a way. Okay, and then we have Henry Sweet, who says that it is the expression of ideas by means of speech sounds combined into words. Words are combined into sentences, this combination answering to that of the ideas into thoughts. Then Bloch and Traeger, they say that language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols by means of which a social group cooperates. Language is a system of conventional spoken, manual, or written symbols by means of which human beings, as a member of a social group and participants in its culture, express themselves. So these definitions that I have on my screen, if you look at it, it comes with so many ideas. But if I put together all of it, but still I won't be able to define the language in a strictest of sense. So the key points, we looked at these definitions, and based on that, these key points are, let's say, the conclusion of whatever that I had on the other slide. Okay, so first thing first is a means of communication. No one can deny that. But there is another clause that says self-expression. And there, remember, at the very beginning of my lecture, I asked you to imagine or picturize, or to think without using any language. right? When you are thinking, that is a part of self expression. When you are talking to yourself, that is self-expression. When you are writing a diary, that is no one is intended to read, you are involved in that process, and there you are using a language. You're not communicating to anyone, right? So both things, a means of communication and self-expression. And then the second part is it is arbitrary. Now, uh, most of the time the term arbitrary has a very negative connotation, right? But here we use it in a positive sense, but still the meaning is same. Language is arbitrary in a way. There is no inherent connection, no natural connection between a word and the meaning it signifies. For example, look at this one. If I call it a cell phone, there is no natural connection, or a table, or a chair, or a horse for that matter. There's no natural connection. It's just, that we can find out because we do not have one language. We have different languages, and in every language, you will see one thing is called by different names. If there was a natural connection, maybe we would say that it is what it is. There is a connection, there is a natural connection, and the speaker of different languages would call that particular thing with the same name, but that's not a possibility, right? So the next point is it is non-instinctive. Non-instinctive. Now, picturize, any animal responding to different situations and the sounds that they would be making. And now come back to us, the human beings, and picturize a situation where somebody is, for example, uh, if I'm having some pain in my head or stomach, or my feet hurt, right? I have different expressions and I can pinpoint how, why, this kind of things, right? And I would come to the animal communication and human language later. I have got that, but I'm not focusing much on that. And then the next point is conventional. Conventional, so there must be a convention that should exist in a society. So let's say whatever the elders agreed on upon, that is how we get this language that we have at this moment of time. It is symbolic. That again, if it is arbitrary, definitely it's symbolic. It's symbol, the things that we see, and the names that we gave to those things, right? Those names are symbols only, nothing else, right? And then systematic. Language is systematic, definitely. So it's symbol, but again, it falls under category, or at least we can call it, it is under a system. There is so many, let's say, for parts of speech. For example, you have a verb, you have a noun, you have pronoun, etc., right? So all those parts of speech, you will see that take out thousands of sentences that you can picturize, imagine, or just look at a book, and you can, in fact, all those sentences can be broken into different categories like noun, verb, pronoun, adjectives, etc., right? Same thing goes on about vocal, social, and human. The points that I mentioned, that this language is, let's say, we are fortunate enough or privileged enough to have this capacity to have language, and we have it. It is a social phenomena, and also most of the time, language is in fact a vocal phenomena. So this is the key points that we have. And then I could have brought Ferdinand de Saussure on this, right? That he says that language is not just the naming of things, right? It is a structure system of science. So there are a great deal of things to talk about in this regard, but I'm not I'm not going to focus much on this part. let's just say, certain features of human language. So I have already described some of it, and then I'm just talking about some more, more points that should be, that should be helping us in a better understanding of any given language, right? So, based on the modality, I would say language is a mode of communication, a mean of communication. Well and good. Language is learned, it is acquired, right? We acquire language. A dog barks the same way. The kids of the puppies would be expressing those same expressions, but in our way, let's say, you will see that there are different. I won't talk like Shakespeare used to talk, right? That is why I would call it. It is acquired, it is learned, right? And then interchangeability is another feature. Then we have cultural transmission and arbitrariness, we already mentioned that. And then discreteness, the feature that is there are sounds and symbols representing those sounds, and the particular way we combine those sounds to make a meaningful expression. And then the next part is displacement, meaning by I can talk about what is happening at this point of time, what happened in the past, and what may happen in the future. So those kind of things. And then productivity, that is being able to uh, come up with new expressions. Now, picturize a couple of years back, or maybe 10 to 20 years back, you couldn't have heard about certain expressions that is quite popular in today's time. Instagram, for that matter. Picturize this. Did you read a word called Instagram maybe 20 years back or something like that? You won't find those words. Those are the new things that happened. Okay, so now that we have a, a basic understanding of the nature of language, let's focus on this part, that is animal communication versus human language. Mind it, I'm not saying animal language. I'm using the expression animal communication because the way they communicate, we haven't categorized it as, let's say, human language. Sorry, as a language per se. Okay, so for that matter, I quoted Bertrand Russell, who said that no matter how eloquently a dog may bark, he cannot tell you that his parents were poor but honest. It's a funny expression, but it emphasizes on that part that they do not have that let's say, capability to use language. What they have are certain instinctual expressions. Okay, that is very much limited. So if we are to differentiate between these two, that is animal communication versus human language, so based on these three things, 4 points, we can do that. For example, productivity. We can always come up with new expressions. Now, those who have read Harry Potter novels, or you watch those movies, or Lord of the Rings, or a fan of Star Wars movies, so you will understand what I'm saying, that every day you can come up with different expressions. Some of them may like the filter and the production goes hand in hand. Every day there are new expressions, and then there are some redundant expressions in that given language that we discard, or we no longer use. And so that happens, right? And then I talked about productivity. Then the next one is displacement, meaning by I can talk about the past, the present, and possible future, etc., etc. And that capability comes, like, I'll be hungry tomorrow, I can say that. But we are pretty sure that the animals cannot communicate this kind of ideas. Okay, Then there is a duality in language, that we have limited number of speech sounds. Every sound that I produce won't fall under the category of language, I would say, right? Those are, so that's why I am using the expression called speech sounds. And from those limited numbers of speech sounds, I can create endless numbers of words. That too, there is an asterisk to that. And then arbitrariness, I told you that whatever that we say are mere sounds, and we have assigned some meaning to those sounds, right? So that's why the arbitrariness of that part is focused here, right? So I just wanted you to have a look at this. It's just whatever that I talked about in the last slide is let's say a conclusion of that in a meme or a cartoon sketch, I would call it. I hope I'm audible so far. I cannot see the screen because I have the PPT on my whole screen, so the rest of you are not visible to me.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
So you are audible, sir.
Great, great. Thank you, ma'am. So moving on, let's say let's talk about the evolution of language. So if I am to talk about the evolution of language, there are different theories, and I'll just touch upon those things because that needs rigorous discussion to go into let's say in if I am to go into a great detailing, then that would require much more time. But I'm just speaking out the few lighter shades of those things. So the scientists, or I would say the linguists, they have given if they study the language, so they gave it like or at least they say the age of language has been put to at least 6,500 before Christ. Okay, so that's the age of language, and so in a way those are the times when the men evolved in a great succession and everything. And then there are different theories. If I'm not going into which country is more had a greater civilization, older civilization and all that, we are not I'm not going there. This data that I have here is strictly coming from the Western linguists. So then first thing first, how it might have evolved, if I think. Now I like to picturize that there are a small group of people living in a one community, or in a very particular a piece of land, or in a particular region, and then they are growing, they are traveling, and then coming in contact with other people. So before they came in contact with other people, they have their own limited number of signals, right? For example, don't go that side, there might be a tiger or a liger or whatnot, don't do this or do that. So that kind of limited signals. And then there are more societies, different groups coming to contact, and then the number of signals are evolving into complex symbols. Okay, and it is growing on, and with that growth there are different like how it might have evolved. This is what I like to think, that they came in contact, met different people, and that evolved and started evolving. And what we have in today's time are the complex system of symbols. Meanwhile, we had, let's say, limited number of signals. Okay, and from visual signals to vocal signals, that's how we have, grown. Then there is a different side of, there is other set of people who like to believe that we have, you know, an inherent part in our mind that makes us capable of being able to let's say use a language. So there is a system saved here by default. Okay, a software already installed, and probably the left brain or the right brain. So there are different kind of theories based on because there have been different if somebody had a brain injury, right? So then there are pretty much chances, or at least if a particular part of the brain is hurt or injured, so the capability to speak and being able to communicate, that's the first thing that goes out of the window, right? Then there are other theories, and in our culture especially, that we often say that the language came down to us from the god, right? Especially Lord Shiva and his Damru, and from there the language came to us. Okay, so this was about the evolution of language, and if I'm to conclude it, so far I go by the evolution. Go by the theory of evolution, that it wasn't something that happened in a day or two, or by some miracle or something like that. I like to believe that it started, or it evolved from simple small expressions to the complex set of expression that we have now. Picturize reading Homi ke Bhabha. Just read a paragraph that he wrote, and you will understand what I mean, how complex it has become, right? So now then there is a different shade, that language in contact and language variation in today's scenario, right? There are different ways and different style of usage of any language, right? Lingua franca. So we often say that English is our lingua franca, right? What does that mean? If I am to ask you, what does lingua franca mean? So it is the language that has become a kind of a bridge language between one linguistic community to the other, right? And then if I am to talk about language variation, then I'm looking at different stages, different regions, right? So picturize this, that some of the Britishers coming to China, and the people of China speak Mandarin, or the most of the people in China speak Mandarin. So Mandarin one side and English on the other, and they come into a contact. There are pretty much chances that there won't be any communication, right? But still, out of need, out of in order to survive, exist in that place, so what they would do, they would simplify the language. So they would use the minimum grammar or words that express most of the things. And the same thing goes for the people of the people who came from Britain, and the people who came from or people of the China, right? So that is a language that developed in that contact region, where they use less grammar but more expressions. Okay, and it is neither English nor Mandarin. So that kind of language often happen, and we gave that kind of contact language, let's say Pidgin. Now I talked about people who came from Britain to China, and then people of China, and they are using a language called Pidgin. And from Pidgin, let's say that is a matter of that happened to a generation. Then there is a next generation, and that generation is using Pidgin as their mother tongue. That contact, that mother tongue, that language that developed at that time becomes a Creole. Okay, just the language is more evolved. The Pidgin language that we were talking is now more evolved. Then there are other aspects of language in contact and language variation. Let's say register. Register is let's say field specific terms, right? If I'm to talk if I'm talking to if a doctor is talking to a doctor, if a lawyer is talking to another lawyer or to the court, the language that lawyer is using has altogether different expression, different word set of words, and a different style of using that language. Now picturize that the same doctor is talking to his son or his daughter, or her son or her daughter. The same thing goes about the lawyer. If the lawyer is talking to the non-law people, the language would be different. The style of using the language would be different. Are you connecting my points? Are you with me so far?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay, so that's how we evolve into this, and from there, uh, slang. Often people confuse okay, slang is let's say informal use of any language. Okay, so now I'm talking to my teacher, my friends, or let's say my students. There's three way. I'm talking to three different set of people, and I won't be talking in a similar way to all of them. There will be some variations, right? So when I'm using a particular language, for that matter, uh, if in English I'm talking to my friends, the style of the language that I'll be using would be pretty much different. And in English I'm talking to you, the way I'm talking is different. Then I'll be talking to my teachers or my students, that's different altogether, right? So slang is informal use of language, right? There are different scope of using if I say I gotta go, that's a slang. If I say I have to go, that's the formal way of using it, right? Then jargon is another expression. Jargon is often confused with register. Nowadays even dictionaries are saying that jargon and register both are same, but I believe that jargons are more informal. Nature is like register only, but it is more informal, right? And from there I talk about Kant or argot. So those are, Kant is something that is very much coded, a language that is very much specific to few people in a particular group that have an agenda. And argot, earlier they used to say this is the language of thieves and everything, right? All those codings that they would say. Okay, so from there, let's come to another part, that is language and dialect. So this is my favorite part, where I talk, or at least people say that there that language is more evolved, dialect is less evolved. Language gets the upper hand, the dialect is language is superior, and a dialect is inferior, not evolved much. Am I right? So far, am I making sense, Kirti ma'am?
Yes, sir, of course.
All right. So we often look up at the language and then look down at a dialect, right? So then there is ethicist Max Wenrich, who once commented that a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. Now, I want you to think about this situation. Why do we have English as our lingua franca? Why do we use in Supreme Courts and in High Courts English as only language, or for that matter, a legal language, English most of the time? And yeah, so if you look at it, a particular set of people almost colonized whole world, and the language of the king or language of somebody who has an army and a navy becomes the language of the people. Still so far, for example, if you remember the movies in the 90s, especially Bollywood movies, you will see that whenever there is a courtroom scene and the judge is about to pronounce a sentence, you will see expressions like taji rate hind dafa 302 or 304, something like that. If you remember these lines that are that have often occurring lines whenever there is a court scene in a movie, you will see this part. So those are the words that came from the kings, the like whosoever ruled the land. The language of the ruler becomes the language of the mass, right? And still up to this point we have the remnants of those language. So coming back to the debate of a language and a dialect. A language is a language, and a dialect is not a language. Rather, it's a dialect. And why it's a dialect? Because it doesn't have script. It doesn't have a grammar. It doesn't have literature. Based on these three key points, we differentiate between a language and a dialect. Most of us would agree that Chhattisgarhi is a dialect. At least when I was a kid and when I was in school, I would read it that Chhattisgarhi is a dialect. Now people are saying that Chhattisgarhi is a language. So now I begin to think that is it so that if a language doesn't have if a dialect doesn't have a script, it makes it a dialect, not a language. And if the same dialect has a script, it becomes a language. Now, one thing that we need to understand is this, that there is no natural connection between the script and the language. And those who use a great deal of WhatsApp would understand, right? Doesn't matter what you are saying, you are using, most of the time you are using Roman script, but the expressions of yours are in more probably let's say Hindi, if we are from the Hindi belt. So it's safe to assume that MAIN and KHANA NAHI KHAUNGA, right? मैं खाना नहीं खाऊंगा. If I'm to communicate that through WhatsApp, right, I'm typing in English. I'm using the script of Roman. So there is no natural connection between a language and the script. Script could be anything, right? Today I'm using a Roman script to talk about English language. To talk about to express Hindi expressions. The same thing could be said about using different script to express English expressions. In fact, one day, I posted a comment where I wrote, I sent it through WhatsApp to my friends, where I wrote certain expressions, Chhattisgarhi expressions, using Roman script, then certain Hindi expressions using again Roman scripts, and then English expressions using Devanagari script. So that is first thing established, that it is not essential that it's not a fault of a dialect to have who doesn't have a script. Okay, it's that no one bothered about documenting the language, so they never had a script, but that doesn't disqualify them as not a language. Then grammar. This is again another important part where we say that that language, that particular dialect doesn't have a grammar. Again, this is a debatable aspect as per my belief. Because what I believe in that you use, and if you count, let's say you write 10 expressions in Chhattisgarhi, let's say 10 sentences in Chhattisgarhi. If you are saying those sentences, you will see that there is a pattern, there is a inherent grammar in that, right? You will be using subject, verb, object, or subject, object, and verb. That kind of structure, you will find that that's the grammar of that dialect. So the dialect that we were talking about has indeed a grammar. Then literature. So thank God that nowadays we have started acknowledging the oral literature, that the vast history of oral literature that we have, right? In every let's say linguistic community, you will see there is a grandfather, grandmother, there is nana, nani, and those nana, nanis, and dada, dadis, they have tremendous amount of stories, and those stories could be in any language: Hindi, English, Chhattisgarhi, or whatnot, right? So it is just that no one documented or put in writings those stories. So we conclude that that particular linguistic community, or the people who have this particular dialect doesn't have a language. So rather they have a dialect, and they doesn't have a literature of their own. Those kind of remarks that we make. But if we are to understand this, that oral literature is a thing now, we are reading those things, reading about those things, and then we are documenting those things as well. So what it comes down, or what it boils down, is simply this: the recognition and the status. In a political setup, if our dialect is officially recognized and promoted, then it is indeed a language, and if it is neglected, then it is a dialect. And moving on, the language and culture and identity. So think about it. Think about an English community. For example, let's say a city in United States, and a Telugu family that moves to that particular city of United States. They know the language, that is English, but at the same time they are also bringing with them their cultural baggage. Okay, so whenever I'm using a particular language, in fact, when I'm talking to you, in fact, at this particular moment, you will be able to trace out some of the individual characteristics, maybe, and also you can chalk out my beliefs and my practices through the language. Okay, this is what I call cultural transmission. That is, whatever that I have, that was given to me, I'm taking it forth with me, right? So my situation in the world, and in the world, that too structured across time and space, and the understanding of the possibilities, and all those things mixed up. Okay, those are the things I call my identity. Okay, and the language has a close relation with identity. Now you'll see I'm not talking about accents, right? The way a person of, let's say, a Punjabi would speak in a different way the English. Even if that particular person is talking in English, will have certain tinge of their native place, The same goes by Chhattisgarh here. Like me, if I'm talking, you can press out certain, let's say, I would call it seasonings of my locality to the English that I'm talking. The same thing goes about any region, any linguistic region in our country, that when they are using any particular, let's say, a second language, they would have the traces of their first language imbibed in that, and it is not a bad thing. It is a thing celebrating. Okay, because we are having two languages. Being able to express yourself in two language is way better than being able to express yourself in one language in the today's world. So it is a great thing. And then you have a different community. Okay, people with different interests, different age group, different gender, different region and religion and education. And based on those things, we have, or at least the way we use any particular language is changes. Okay, sometimes I wonder, like, nowadays I'm not that old, so still I can understand what the youth talk, the way they talk to some extent. But I'm very much afraid when I grow a bit older, I won't be able to understand what exactly they are talking about. Okay, so these are the things that I have here. And also, I wanted to point out that the social stereotypes that we have in our society. Okay, social stereotypes, what I mean by that is we often look up at the speakers of a particular language, and then we look down at the speakers of a particular language, right? So in a way, we assign more prominence to a particular language, and then we undermine the other language, right? For example, English is like, if I don't know English, then I will curse in every possible way the language English, right? And if I know language, let's say if I know English language, so maybe I would look down at all the other local language. And this kind of things brings in a kind of or at least affect the society in an adverse way, I would say it, right? If I can, in a particular location, in a particular place, for example, if I'm going to a restaurant to have my favorite food, uh, if I'm using English expressions in my communication, maybe the servant, the people around me, they will admire my style of talking, and would consider me a person of class. However, if I go there and if I express in, let's say, my mother tongue, I would say in Chhattisgarhi, then they would maybe probably, you can picturize the scenario, right? So that's how it happens, and it shouldn't happen. It's not a good thing for a society to grow at large. Okay, so moving on. How much time do I have? Anyone?
I think 50 to 60 minutes you had, according to the brochure that I read.
Okay, so if I started at 6:30, then 7:30. Okay, okay. So I think I'm way over my designated time. Anyways,
Well, the topic is so comprehensive now, you are doing very well.
thank you, ma'am. So now, this is last, by the way. So just I won't take much time. Language and digital advancement. Remember, I was talking about the let's say the productivity feature of language, that it can come up with different expressions, right? So language is indeed very creative and very much productive, right? It goes on. For example, Google, internet, or website for that matter, and nowadays we have hashtag. Podcast, emoji, streaming, digitize, figure station, buffer, jiffy, and Ubered and people were cloud crawling, etc., etc. Think about this expression that we have now. I can ascertain this that let's say maybe 50 years back, none of these words on my screen were in uses or in existence, right? So as the time grows, as the time advances, as we have new things, we make new things, and then there are things that we no longer use, and it is goes out of trend, out of use, and maybe someday forgotten as well. It's a possibility, but uh, the conclusion is simply this, that the proposition that I made, that all languages are equal. We shouldn't discriminate, or we shouldn't say this language is better, this language is not better. Learn as many as you can when it comes to language, but no language is better or worse for that matter. Every language has its own beauty, and it is a thing of beauty to be celebrated. So this is how I conclude my session. And if you have questions, feel free to ask. And so that's all from my side.
So I have a question.
Yeah, Mimansha, go
So
ahead.
it's regarding the fact that since we are going to a future where digitalization is very fast, where AIs are introducing to our community. So is there a need to learn a language? They are building robots. They are building everything so that we humans do not have to go through the trouble to learn language. I as well feel it very like it's a very disappointing thing because I also learned a language and it's really a disappointing thing for me, sir.
See, machine is a machine, human is a human, right?
Yes, sir.
And the time when we have perfected a machine would be a time when the machine has controlled us. Okay. I'm not that great fan of science fiction movies, but I have seen a great deal of movies.
Yes,
So
sir.
I know, from Terminator to everything, and the situation of language. So if everything is being done by the machine, so obviously there won't be many humans left, to bother about this kind of things. So
Yes.
I mean that's a very much dystopian view, but on the positive side, uh, machine is helping us in so many ways in a better communication. So now think about it. As of now, the most of the linguistic programs are in those machines or artificial intelligence is English.
Yes, sir.
Picturize maybe another 20, 30, 50, 100 years later, it's some other language which has got the dominance. So the language, the programmings and everything would revert back or go would be used in a different language, right? So
Yes.
being able to learn different language is a beautiful thing first. And as far as mankind are still mankind, there is a space for different languages. There will be different languages, and uh, we will be using those languages. Okay, so it goes hand in hand, right? You just the day language die is the same thing goes. I can say, I mean, I'm not that much reluctant to say that we the mankind would be the same, right?
Yes.
Our fate and the fate of a language go hand in hand.
I would also like to add something to this. It's a good answer. I think the creativity and originality artificial intelligence can never have. Then, as a student of language and teacher, when I write something, those machines don't help me because there are some sentences that they are incapable of handling. which particularly we the students of literature, we know the complex sentences and all, they would say they revise and all. So machine cannot give that kind of knowledge. It can be a little help. And sometimes I do feel when I see PG students taking the help of these machines, they are spoiling their language.
Ma'am, in fact, uh, it's a very much depressing to know this, that especially in a places like this, where I am using constantly Google Translate, and Sagar sir will understand why we are using Google Translate. So most of the time there is some program we are making press release and this and that, right? So we will have to translate it. If I composed it in English, then I had to translate it into Hindi, so that it goes to different paper. And in order to do that, we take help from Google, Google Translate, and the results are disastrous in so many ways, I'm telling you. And one has to like literally touch your forehead and rub slightly. That kind of expression is there. So
And
that happens.
nowadays, people are just speaking and relaying that text material. And as a result, you can see if you go to Shankar Nagar, the busiest crossroad, they have a shop of juices and fruits, and it's written juices or fruits. Maybe
Mhm.
all fruit unne bola hoga, instead of and they have written or. That is digitalization of
Yes,
language.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I understand. So the more the we are getting, let's say, uh, computer, uh, the more we are relying on the machine, the more we are getting out of touch with our language. So in that time, but again, I would say, as far as the mankind, the humanity, the human essence of ours are still intact, no language is in danger.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
So then I just wanted to know, in fact, wanted to discuss with you that you talked about dialects and language. So when does a dialect becomes a language? What
Uh,
factors are responsible for it?
in
As far as I
our
remember, when I
yes,
was in graduation, we used to learn if a language is spoken by some powerful group, then that dialect becomes this thing. Maybe religious power or financial power or rulers. So language of rulers, even if it is a dialect, is raised to the level of language. Am I right?
yes, ma'am. In fact, when I started talking about dialect and language, I specifically mentioned that language is a dialect, with a navi, and what was the other expression, I forgot. Okay, so the
Army,
thing is,
army.
yeah, the army, yes, ma'am. So it is correlated in a way. The more the people who use a particular language, and if they are powerful, their language becomes the language of others. We celebrate those
There was a
languages.
time when Awadhi almost became a language during those Tulsidas and all, but then again, it was
No, no,
the
no, no.
language of Delhi.
Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And also, for that matter, there are tremendous examples. In Chhattisgarh, we don't say rich people, which are originally from Chhattisgarh. So making a language, a dialect, a language, first, it's a constitutional thing that we have in it should be amended and included in the eighth schedule of our constitution. And I googled out, and the numbers of the dialects who are in the line to be recognized as language is more than 39, ma'am. So there are more than 39 dialects slash language which are in line in queue to be accepted, to be recognized by the constitution as language. So
Okay,
that is on one hand. And then uh, Okay, that's pretty much what. And
Thank you, sir. Your knowledge is very up to date.
So I have one more question. So
please.
are language bendable? Can we bend a language? For example, sir, in Sanskrit, there were no words for calculator or something like that. But today, if we search for it, we see that there are words for calculator that are spoken in Sanskrit. But so why is that? So why can we? Sanskrit is a language that was written many years back. It has scriptures. Why is it that we are able to change the language, produce new words in that?
That is, I would say we no longer use Sanskrit in our day-to-day conversation. We don't have a person whose mother tongue is Sanskrit. We often say then there are some languages which are dead. We often use Greek, Latin for that matter. Those are the dead languages,
Yes,
right?
sir.
When I say that, it is because there wasn't a growth that we can find. When something becomes fixed, static, it is no longer used. If, for example, Chhattisgarhi dialect that we have,
Yes, sir.
is there any word for bulb?
I have no idea.
No. For us, it is bulb,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
Now, for a language has language keeps changing, and the moment it stops changing, it becomes redundant or no longer in use. Okay, so in order to survive, if a language has to survive, it should be constantly accepting new things and rejecting things which are no longer no longer serve any purpose. So that's the flow of a river. The same thing about language.
Okay, sir. So, but
It
if
is
it's
like it is like any other living organism. It
Definitely,
takes birth, it grows, and if it also dies.
definitely, ma'am. Definitely.
So and the words can freely be taken from other languages to enrich it, as English has done. So many
Yes,
Indian
ma'am.
words and other languages, it has borrowed words.
Definitely, ma'am.
Numerous
Definitely.
words are there.
Yes, ma'am.
thank you so much, sir. If anybody have any queries, they can write it in the chat box or can speak directly. Since there are no more queries, or does anyone have anything to add to it? Okay, so since no one have anything to add, I would like to proceed further to call upon our chairperson, Mr. Jeevan Sagar sir, who is a graduate in arts from Durg Mahavidyalaya and has done his post graduation in MA English from Ravi Shankar Shukla University, Raipur, with a merit rank, and he has qualified UGC NET in July 2015. He has as well done B.Ed from IGNU and PGTCE from ELFU, Hyderabad. At present, he is pursuing his doctoral studies from Ravi Shankar Shukla University, Raipur. Prior to joining HNLU, he had been an assistant professor in Government Engineering College, in Government Engineering, sorry, sir, College, Jagdalpur, under the Directorate of Technical Education. He has also served as a lecturer in the Department